Well, first of all, it's a pleasure. Pleasure to be here at the workshop. Pleasure to have also the chance to present Impresso. It's not my current research project, but I had the privilege to be working in this team. And I should really put it as a big disclaimer. There is a team of 15 people behind the project, so I'm just presenting it, but it's really been a team effort behind. Brief introduction to the newspaper, so I don't need to, we're all familiar with newspapers, that's a good thing. On the other hand, I think we are less used to see them like as printed papers. We're more accessing them probably in the browser than physically, but we are all used to it. They contain, they're really kind of they contain lots of information, newspapers. So they report about local news, international news, major events like wars, but also small events and local events. And also in their production, they reflect the cultural environment, the historical situation, the political environment and economic environment in which they were produced. So in other words, they contain diverse, dense and continuous information. And historians, they have heard it already, but they've been using them for a long time for their research. And their research at the same time with newspapers has changed a lot. 10 years ago, so there were two main obstacles to using newspapers. One is the accessibility, and the other one is the digitization. But over the years, their situation has been changing a lot. So if before they were not accessible in digital format, and a historian had to go through an archive and turn in hundreds of pages before arriving to the articles that they were interested in, now there are many portals and libraries offering access to digitized newspapers, accessing the surrogate, so the digitized image of the pages, and also the ability most of the times to search through the OCR. This is a great step forward, but at the same time still has some limitations. So the problem with keyword search is that either you have too many results or there are missing results due to the OCR, or there are also not relevant results to your search query. So these are still limitations that are kind of hindering the work of historians with this type of materials. And when we ask them in the project, how do you need support with digital tools to work with newspapers, they came out with different cries for help, let's say. So one typical one was, I have a search query, I want to search my corpus of newspapers, but I want this, be able to expand this query, for example, to take into account spelling, so OCR noise, so be able to find this word despite the OCR containing mistakes. So in this case, you have, for example, Regierung, government in German, and then the ability of finding this word despite the fact that the OCR might have misspelled it, or also the ability of expanding this to include synonyms. So not just Regierung, but also Behörden or Staatsrat, to expand my query taking into account synonyms of the word. So for this, lexical processing, it's offering, for example, the fuzzy matching with added distance, or the ability of generating word embeddings where it's possible to get these synonyms from a large corpus. Second typical cry for help is, I want to find the frequency of a word, but only in articles of a certain type. For example, I don't want to see the occurrence of this word in advertisements, very typical, or in stock market, or train timetables, or weather forecast pages, but I want to isolate it. And for this, the techniques that come to help is the image segmentation from computer vision, or the text classification from NLP that allow you to segment the page of a newspaper into areas of that are thematically different. For example, the feuilleton from the local news, or isolate the header, and so on. Another typical request is, again, to be able to work with named entities. We heard it already. So ambiguity, it's one of the obstacles there. I want to find articles where there is Jean Monnet mentioned, but then I want to filter only want the results belonging to the right Monet, not to the other. So I want my disambiguation to work properly. Also, I'm interested in co-occurrences of people mentioned. So I want to articles where Jean Monnet is mentioned together with other entities, and I want to see what they are, how they're related. Or again, I want to be able to find articles where the role is differentiated. So where Jean Monnet is the author of the article as opposed to just being mentioned, or where it's kind of the main subject of an article. And for this, we have name entity processing as a technique that we can apply. Then, of course, these were only three main examples, but there were also other requests. Of course, there is the recommendation systems type of help. So where they're like, okay, I want to discover, I found a certain number of items. I want to find similar items in the collection. So having some sort of a recommendation system to suggest them. Or I want to have, I create a corpus and I want to see some sort of bird eye view, high level thematics of my collection. Or again, build my corpus. This was a very clear requirement from historians to be able to take the whole, create a subset and work on it, refine it, explore it, and manipulate it. So that's also interact with it. So these were other requests for help. In other words, what they were asking was to have semantic indexing of these collections, of historical collections of newspapers, and a way of exploring them. And to tackle this question, we had this Impresso project, was a Synergia project involving multiple institutions, founded by the Swiss National Science Foundation. There was the PFL, where I used to work before being at the University of Lausanne, the Computational Linguistics Department in Zurich, at the University of Zurich, and the Center for Contemporary and Digital History at the University of Luxembourg. We also had a network of data providers providing us the data, but also providing, and associated partners providing us with feedback and use cases about for the project. I mentioned already, it's a big team. It's an interdisciplinary team. So it was really highly interdisciplinary as a project. There was a mix of people working in NLP, DH, computational linguistics, engineers, web developers, designers, and of course, historians. Plus also having an advisory board of historians to give us feedback, and associated historians providing additional use cases for the project. So here's a bit the very abstract way, but the plan of the project. So the very first steps was to gather the data, receiving the digitized newspapers from the libraries, coming mainly in three different forms: metadata, images, and OCR for the text. Then there was the whole pipeline for processing them and extract information from them automatically. And then a core part of the project was the co-design of a web interface that will allow the exploration of this corpus of newspapers. And I will talk about this co-design in a few slides. Once this was finished, the idea was to have a tool that would enable to explore, also to say, new horizons in digital history research with newspaper sources. So before also showing you the tool, I want to focus on some 5 key challenges that we had to face, very similar to what Antoine has also mentioned. The materials are the same, so there is a certain overlap between the two. The first is the problem of digitized newspaper silos, which has 2 sub-issues. So one is the digitization of the materials, and the other one is their accessibility. So the digitization, a recent study has shown that what is being digitized in terms of newspapers by the libraries, it's about 10% of the production of newspapers. So we are not dealing with the whole, we are dealing with a fraction. And even when this has been digitized, this doesn't necessarily mean available. So here you have the quantity of digitized newspaper titles by country and also by year over time. So this is the kind of the picture of the quantity you get. And as soon as you want to have a look at the openly available materials, then your picture is changing drastically. So having them digitized doesn't mean that they are accessible. And we had exactly the same issue also in Impresso. which for the historians creates a tension in the sense that if they want to work with perfect data, like highly homogeneous, good quality, they would inevitably have a small corpus. And if they want to have coverage, on the other hand, then they will have something which is more like Google Books, but as we all know, in terms of metadata, quality of the text, not ideal. I think digitized newspapers are currently in this position. So not great coverage, and also in some cases, not great quality and homogeneity of the corpus. And the idea also in the project was trying to push the situation more towards higher quality and homogeneity, and also broader coverage, taking into account really lots of newspaper data. And to get this data, we, and especially my colleague Moderman, we went to a data acquisition campaign that she nicknamed the data acquisition crusade. But the term crusade is really to reflect actually the amount of effort that went into this, particularly when it came to negotiating license agreements with the publishers. So we were not in the lucky situation where negotiating with 1 or 2 publishers would be enough. Many of these newspapers are local, so they are published by different entities. So this would mean making contracts, renewing them, having agreements with 50 different entities. And that's what is trying to be reflected in the crusade. So once we got all this data, then of course we realized there was really big data and also messy. To say something about the messiness, so I said already we have 3 types of objects. We have images, OCR for the text coming in different formats, like Mezzalto, Olive, which is a proprietary obsolete format, or in a PDF, as PDFs. Then you have images also coming in different formats, and then you have metadata coming according to different schemes. So in all these cases, what we had to do was to bring this heterogeneity to some sort of normalized form. So which was JSON for the OCR, JPEG 2000 for the images, and then we also normalized to a common schema of metadata. So at the end was lots of normalization, which always poses the risk of also losing some information in this process of normalizing. So we had to be careful about that. Lots of surprises. It's not that they give you the data and it's all perfect and usable. So we had, for example, with the OCR problem of completely empty folders that were not containing the data were supposed to contain, or zip archives that we will not be able to open, so they were completely corrupted, or inconsistencies in these formats that we had to take into account, trying to collect information to fill these gaps, but most importantly, document all these problems to make them transparent to the historians that were using the corpus at the end. So try not to cover what are the imperfections when you're working with big data, but actually try to make them surface, to make them clear and transparent to the historians. This for the OCR. The problem with the image is mostly related to box coordinates, so coordinates of the words in a page, especially when you need to do conversions between images, different resolutions where the coordinates were computed. So this can create a few headaches. And for metadata, you have the problem of partial metadata and also non-normalized, so not using authority files and the like. And all these steps, it's important to highlight it. They're extremely time consuming, but also, I said it already, when working with in a big data project, there is the risk of, since the data is so big, you can easily kind of hide them. For historians, it was really important to actually be aware of them. Because, yeah, if you don't find something because it doesn't exist, it's one thing. If you don't find it because there is a zip archive that it's corrupted, at least it's useful to know where the zip compromised archive is. About the OCR noise coming from the historical text, a very good example that we all like in the project is about Gazelle. So looking at the OCR data and word frequency in the corpus, there was this strange artifact of a peak in the number of gazelles in Switzerland in the second half of the 19th century. So it was a bit confusing, and maybe we were facing kind of a change in the animal population, but actually it was simply the OCR. The Gazette de Lausanne is one of the titles of the newspapers, and it was producing the impression that there were lots of gazelles in that period in Lausanne. We have already mentioned the OCR. Also, in the case of our project, it was not the aim of the project to improve the quality of the OCR. So the colleagues in Zurich worked on developing new models for one specific part of the collection. They were able to improve a lot the quality of the OCR compared to what we had as a legacy from the libraries. But it was not the main concern of the project to be redoing the OCR, even because with the millions of pages we have, it would have taken lots of time and resources. So instead, we decided to go more for what we call OCR quality assessment. So an indicator quantified that the users of the interface have to know roughly the quality of the page. And this we didn't compute it as word error rate or character error rate, but simply we focus on the content words. So we try to come up with a more simple measure, excluding stop words and punctuation. So a measure that it's easy to grasp for non-technicians as an indicator of the quality of the OCR. And in terms of processing, we did lexical processing, so identifying the language of the newspapers, of the articles. Not always the data coming from the libraries actually are accurate and reflect the real language of the article. In some cases, we had to actually reperform that. Historical spelling normalization. When you deal with diachronic data, there are different spellings, especially for certain languages that need to be normalized. Lemmatization was needed for computing the topic modeling. And then word embeddings to support this expansion of the query. I will show it later. OCR quality assessment to give an indicator of the quality. Topic modeling to be able to classify what is article about. It's about sport, it's about politics, it's about advertisement. Negative processing, extraction of persons, organizations, and locations, and the linking to Wikidata. And also the extraction of text reviews. So related to what Miko presented this morning, finding essentially instances of copy-paste or reuse of a certain portion of a text inside the corpus. And last but not least, computing the image similarity in order to be able to search for images within the collection. These are lots of different techniques, and in the YouTube channel, we have a series of videos going more into the details of how we performed each of these enrichments. And two main things to be said about the application of NLP tools to historical text. One that is challenging, there is the problem of language variation, OCR noise, so tools that are out of the box that work great for contemporary data in English, for example, not necessarily work well for historical text in multiple languages. So there is lots of adaptation, fine-tuning, and so on needed. And also what is the historians in the project called critical text mining, in the sense of finding the right NLP tools to address the right research question, not to use an NLP technique for its own sake, but to choose it if it's really helpful to address a certain research question. And a central challenge of the project was how to best accommodate text analysis research tools in an interface that can be used by humanities scholars for their research. And that's how the co-design methodology came into play. So it's really based on very close interaction between all the people coming from the different disciplines that were part of the project. And this was realized through workshops, through multiple calls, either all together with the associated researchers or also one-to-one, on an initial survey of existing interfaces, but most importantly on workshops to work over and over again and to refine ideas that will come up by a dialogue between all these different types of people that you see nicely represented in this picture. The wireframes were, of course, one of the starting points for the design of the interface that we discussed all together. And then there was a continuous cycle of feedback in order to see what the ideas of the designers and the developers, how the historians would react. So, for example, here you see some functionalities, and all had to feel this sort of form with strength and weaknesses, so trying to incorporate this feedback from as early as possible in the project in the design of the interface. I don't think there is a single component of the interface that remained the same as to the initial wireframe as it was proposed. So each component was really refined by workshops where scenarios and use cases emerged. There were fast prototypes made to see how that worked, and that was refined in multiple iterations. Here it's an example of one of the parts of the interface that I will also show. On the left, you see the very first, not even mock-up, but really wireframe of this idea. So it's a tool, it's a part of the interface to inspect and contrast different parts of the collections. So that's how it looked initially. Then there was a first implementation that was not really convincing. And then there was a new kind of visualization idea that maybe you recognize. It came up on Slack, so we discussed it there. And this led to the implementation and design that you currently have in the interface. So just to give you an example of really how this co-design has shaped from the beginning the design of the interface. And finally, for the historians in the project, there was the challenge of doing digital scholarship working with this type of data, generated algorithmically, changing rapidly, and also containing imperfection. And some of the main strategy that I developed to work with these materials and also takeaways for us from the project was that having a beautiful interface doesn't mean that behind you have perfect data. And if you have imperfect data, it doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot do anything with it. So this was the setting in which they had to work in the project. And I'm happy to. I'm not brave enough to do a live demo of the interface. I will show you a video, which is a bit fast, so maybe I'll take some breaks and pause it a bit. But in this demo, I will show you one of the use cases that we had in the project. Is the Battle of Arnhem in the Second World War. Was one of the biggest operations of the Allied forces, where coming from the air they would drop soldiers closer to secure the bridges and then make it into Germany, which of course didn't work out as a plan. And what we wanted to see was the coverage of this event in the press from Switzerland and Luxembourg. These are the two. I'm not sure whether I said it before, but we have been working in the project with Swiss and Luxembourgish newspapers. So with this, I will just to go quickly to the video, which has already started. This is not connected, right? Okay, so when you go to the Impresso -project.ch app, then that's what you will see. So that's our application. In the center part of the interface, you have the registration form to be able to access the entire content, not only the public domain part. And then we have a series of tutorials, what we call the Impresso challenges, that guide you step by step through the different facets of the interface. You can kind of use them to explore the different functionalities. On the left, you have the statistics about how many pages and articles we have in there, and we can start searching for Arnhem, which is a place where the battle happened. So here we do pure string search, resulting into 4,000 articles. You have the distribution over time on the entire corpus and also the relative one. And the first thing we can do is try to expand our query by similar words. So these similar words are produced by the word embeddings, and we can choose, for example, misspellings of the word. Here you have Arnhem, or you have another variant spelling for Arnheim, or there is also an example of E and H that are confused. So you can include these similar words in your search and expand it. And we already obtained 6,800 articles. So it's almost 3,000 more than what we had with the initial search that we did. On the left, you have the different facets coming from the metadata, so the country of provenance, the access, public domain or not, and you have the topics. And these topics are coming from the topic modeling that we performed. And these topics can be used as filters to my search query. So here I can go zoom into a topic, see how the topic is distributed in the entire corpus or only in my search, and contrast the two. And I can also go and browse more and see more information about the topic. So here you see, for example, diachronic distribution again. What are the important words making up the topic? When we go back to our search, we find, for example, I don't know whether it's big enough for you to read, but there are some topics that are clearly about sport. And since we're interested in the Battle of Arnhem, we don't want to have sport in there. So what we can do is to take these two topics, select them, and say, please exclude them from my search. So we are already cleaning our initial search and removing about 1,500 articles. So now that I have this kind of nicely done query, I can save it as a collection to be able to work on it in the future in my workspace. So here you have the results. Each result has a thumbnail where you can zoom in already to get a glimpse of the content. And then if you click on it, you will be taken by default to the page viewer, where you have the facsimile, you have your article, you have some annotations done automatically in what we call marginalia, and then you can see the transcript where you have the image and the OCR side by side. And on the top, you have all the information coming from topics and named entities that were extracted automatically. And at the bottom, you have similar articles that are suggested to you. If we click on a named entity, it's linked to Wikidata. So you can go to Wikidata, find additional information. Here is Marika Rock, who was an actress accused to be a spy in this whole operation, a spy for the Germans. And you, in Wikidata, you will have it's linked, so you will have additional information in there. You can also browse the entity page where you have all the related articles mentioning this person also outside of my collection. And the green part is the text reuse. So if you know what it is, you can click on the info button and get more information in there. Extremely useful for the historians who are not familiar with this technique. So, and if you click on it, you will be taken to the cluster of text reuse that contain repetition of the same articles. Here we have 2 articles at a distance of a couple of days in a Swiss and Luxembourgish newspaper. So the topics have a dedicated page with some visualization, which is a bit experimental. There is an entire section on text reuse. So here it's possible to search again for R9 within all the clusters of text reuse that were extracted automatically. And since it's a lot of them, we provided several ways of filtering them. So it's possible to filter them by lexical overlap, so that there are similarity. It's possible to filter them by the time span, the distance of publication between the two. So here, for example, you have a cluster reporting different newspapers about the bad weather conditions that there were during the operation in Harnain. And you can refine your browsing, taking different criteria, narrow down by newspaper, the time span that they cover, and so on. A couple of last highlights of the interface. This is a famous inspector compare part about which I was talking before. So here, what the historian can do is to take 2 different queries and contrast them and compare them. So you can see the things that are in common, and also you can visualize what are the differences. So here we are taking the Battle of Arnhem and we compare it with the Battle of Stalingrad, another important battle, to see the different coverage in the 2 newspaper corpora. Once you add it to the inspect and compare, you can also filter it down by topic, again, taking only the topic of war, so to have more precise query. And then you see, for example, there are 7 articles that are talk about the 2 battles at the same time. So here it's possible to open the search in the page and to drill down into the content of the articles. I think I will stop it here because it's otherwise it's running late. The interface is openly available. If you request for an account, you have access to the parts that are not in the public domain. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Matteo, for your really intensive presentation. Are there any questions? What's that?
Thanks for the topics. It's amazing that we are now in a moment where this is possible. About the account and the non-public part. So, surprise me, if I understood it correctly, anyone can actually apply for an account.
Yeah.
They have to be part of the university.
No, actually there is a simple mechanism of, I'm not sure whether it's there anymore, but before you were supposed to send an ID, a copy of an ID, just to make sure that it was an actual person. Might not be there anymore, but anyone can apply for the account. In the account, essentially, you just accept the terms of the agreement. So where you can use this for a search, you cannot republish parts of the material. So it's simply, but anyone can apply for it. But this was necessary to give access to the part that is not in the public domain, or where the providers of the data didn't agree with putting it openly available.
Yeah, that's great, and that's surprising a lot because from our perspective, or from the perspective of the institution where I work, and normally some of those services we just can offer them to the people who are already part of the university. Great that you were able to open more.
But this required to negotiate the rights with the publisher. So we could not just say, okay, the library gave us the data, we can put them out there. We had to go to each individual publisher of the newspaper saying, are you okay that your data are available in the interface? So that created a huge overhead. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, allows us to give a kind of a broader access to the content.
Thanks. Any other question? There is one in the chat, which is technically languages. For which languages is your pipeline available? Does it work also with something else than the languages used in Switzerland or Luxembourg?
So currently we have French, German, English, and Luxembourgish in the pipeline. So these are the languages for which it's proved to work fine. And we cannot, will not work adding any other languages to the pipeline.
Okay, thank you. Any other question?
And possibility to kind of accommodate the pipeline for other languages as well. How difficult do you think that would be?
I mean, that's mostly, I think it's mostly for the text we use is language agnostic. The whole part on the OCR is a language agnostic topic. So for each language, we have a dedicated topic model. So that will need to be recomputed. The topic modeling technique in itself is language agnostic. I think the main impact is on the linking and extraction of the entities, where typically the models on certain languages work well, but you need to have other lexical resources, other embeddings to make them work. It's not impossible, but that would require some extension and some work. And the code, I mean, the whole code for the interface and also for the project, I think it was in the last slide. It's released openly, so potentially the interface can also be reused in other projects. It will require installation, adaptation, but it's all done in the open access resource. Okay, I don't want to take more time to the next part.
Okay, so if there is any other question, please keep it for the couloir. For the
coffee, yeah. Thank you.